Grief is a peculiar thing. It's like a storm, but instead of coming and going, it lingers indefinitely, ebbing and flowing as it pleases. It crashes into your life without warning, leaving behind a trail of destruction you never thought possible. When my stepdaughter, Becca, passed away 4 weeks ago, I thought the storm had reached its peak. I thought the worst of it was losing her. But grief, as I've learned, can take many forms, and sometimes, it wears the face of betrayal. Becca came into my life 7 years ago, when she was just a shy little girl with big brown eyes that always seemed to be searching for something. Her father, Derek, and I had been dating for a few months when I met her, and I was immediately smitten. She had a way of lighting up a room with her quiet curiosity, the kind of child who could spend hours drawing or playing in the garden without ever seeming bored. Over time, we grew close. Slowly but surely, she let me into her world, and I became more than just her father's girlfriend, I became her mom. It wasn't an easy transition. Becca already had a mother, Sam, who loved her deeply. But Sam wasn't like most ex-wives. She didn't resent me for being part of Becca's life. In fact, she welcomed me with open arms. Over time, the three of us, Derek, Sam, and I, found a rhythm that worked. We celebrated Becca's milestones together, went to her school events as a united front, and even shared the occasional dinner. It wasn't conventional, but it worked. For 7 years, we were a picture of modern co-parenting done right. And then Becca was gone. 4 weeks ago, my world collapsed. Becca was only 14, so young, so full of life. Losing her was like losing a piece of myself. I barely remember the days that followed her death. They blur together in a haze of tears, sleepless nights, and the suffocating weight of her absence. The house felt so empty without her laughter, her art supplies scattered on the kitchen table, or the sound of her humming while she worked on a new drawing. Sam took it hard. Harder than I'd ever seen anyone take anything. She was always a bit fragile, prone to anxiety, but this was different. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't even be alone in her own home. When she confided in me that she was struggling, I didn't hesitate to offer her a place to stay. After all, she was family, or as close to family as someone can be when you share a child. 4 weeks, Sam stayed with us. She moved into Becca's room, surrounded by her daughter's belongings, as though being close to her things would somehow bring her back. I didn't mind. I understood her need to grieve in her own way. Derek supported the decision, too. He said it was the least we could do for someone who had lost so much. At first, it felt like the right thing to do. We mourned together, shared memories of Becca, and leaned on each other when the pain became too much to bear. Sam and I had always gotten along well, but this tragedy seemed to forge an even deeper bond between us. She confided in me about her darkest thoughts, and I did my best to reassure her. I wanted her to know she wasn't alone, that she had people who cared about her. But grief is a strange and unpredictable thing. It doesn't just bring people together, it can also tear them apart. It was an ordinary day when everything changed. I had errands to run, just the usual mundane tasks that somehow felt monumental in the wake of Becca's death. Before I left, I checked on Sam, who was curled up in Becca's bed, her face pale and tear-streaked. She declined my offer to join me, saying she just wanted to sleep. I understood. Some days, it felt like sleep was the only escape from the pain. I told Derek I'd be back in a couple of hours and asked him to check on Sam while I was gone. He was working from home, as he often did, and assured me he'd look after her. It was a normal exchange, the kind we'd had countless times before. Halfway through my errands, I realized I'd forgotten a library book I needed to return. Cursing my forgetfulness, I decided to swing back home to grab it. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed nothing out of the ordinary. The house was quiet, just as I'd left it. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt off. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. And then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of moaning, coming from the direction of my bedroom. My heart sank. For a moment, I froze, unable to process what I was hearing. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more horrifying than the last. But deep down, I already knew what I would find. I knew before I even opened the door. When I did, the sight before me confirmed my worst fears. There they were, Derek and Sam, tangled together in our bed. My bed. The place where I had shared countless nights with the man I thought I knew. The man I thought I loved. They didn't notice me at first, too consumed by each other to realize they were no longer alone. It wasn't until I slammed the door open and began yelling that they finally looked up, their faces a mix of shock and shame. Sam bolted from the bed, clutching a sheet to her chest as she ran to the bathroom, her breathing ragged. Derek, on the other hand, stayed frozen, his face pale as he stammered out an apology. "I'm sorry," he said, over and over again, as if those words could erase what I'd just witnessed. "It's not what it looks like. We were just—" "Don't you dare finish that sentence," I snapped, my voice trembling with rage. I know exactly what I saw. Tears streamed down my face as I demanded an explanation. How could they do this to me? To Becca's memory? In the midst of my grief, when I needed them the most, how could they betray me like this? Derek's excuses came tumbling out, each one more pathetic than the last. He said they had been talking about Becca, sharing memories, and comforting each other. One thing led to another, and before they knew it, they were in bed together. "It was a mistake," he said, his voice desperate. "We were just grieving. It didn't mean anything. But it meant everything to me." Derek's words echoed in my mind like a cruel taunt. It didn't mean anything. How could he say that? How could he trivialize what they had done, what I had walked in on, by calling it a mistake born of grief? Grief was a storm, yes, but it didn't justify destroying the very foundation of trust we'd built together. Sam's muffled sobs from the bathroom only fueled my anger. I could barely stand to look at Derek as he sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, muttering apologies like they were a magic spell that could fix everything. My chest felt tight, my throat burned, and my thoughts spiraled between rage and heartbreak. Finally, I snapped, my voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. "How long has this been going on?" Derek looked up at me, his eyes wide. "What are you talking about? It just happened. I swear. Don't lie to me." I screamed, my voice cracking. "I need the truth. Now." He hesitated, and that split second of silence was all the confirmation I needed. I felt sick to my stomach. My hands trembled as I clenched them into fists at my sides, trying to steady myself. "Was it before Becca died?" I asked, my voice quieter now, more dangerous. Derek looked like he might vomit. "Alyssa, please. Answer me," I yelled, my throat raw. He finally nodded, and in that moment, the fragile remains of my world collapsed entirely. The tears I'd been holding back spilled over as I stumbled backward, the weight of his betrayal threatening to crush me. How long?" I choked out. 3 months, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 months. That meant they had been sneaking around while we were still trying to care for Becca in her final days. While I was focused on her, on holding our family together, they had been tearing it apart behind my back. I couldn't breathe. The walls of the room seemed to close in around me, suffocating me with the enormity of it all. Sam emerged from the bathroom then, her face pale and tear-streaked. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "It wasn't supposed to happen. We didn't mean to hurt you." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and foreign in the tense silence. "Didn't mean to hurt me? You slept with my husband. Repeatedly. In my house. While I was grieving my stepdaughter, your daughter. And you're telling me it wasn't supposed to hurt? Sam flinched, tears spilling down her cheeks, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy for her. Not now. Maybe not ever. She had been my friend, my ally, someone I trusted implicitly. And now she was nothing but a stranger to me. I want you both out of this house, I said, my voice cold and unyielding. Now. Derek started to protest, but I silenced him with a glare. I don't care where you go or what you do, but you can't stay here. Neither of you. Sam didn't argue. She simply gathered her things and left without another word. Derek, on the other hand, lingered, his face a portrait of guilt and desperation. Please, Alyssa, he pleaded. Don't do this. We can fix this. I love you. You don't love me, I snapped. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. Now leave. When the door finally closed behind him, the weight of everything hit me like a tidal wave. I sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, the enormity of what I had lost, what they had taken from me, crushing me. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Derek and Sam both tried to reach out to me, but I blocked their numbers. I couldn't bear to hear their excuses or apologies. I confided in my mother, who was outraged on my behalf, and a few close friends, who offered their unwavering support. But even with their help, I felt completely alone. One night, Derek showed up at the house unannounced. I was too tired to argue, so I let him in. He seemed different, more defeated than I'd ever seen him. He confessed everything, spilling secrets I hadn't asked for but desperately needed to know. He and Sam had reconnected one night while I was visiting my mom. They had been drinking, reminiscing about old times, and one thing led to another. It wasn't just once, either. They had been sleeping together for months, sneaking around behind my back while I poured my heart and soul into caring for Becca. I never wanted this to happen, Derek said, his voice trembling. I don't know. We were both in a bad place, Anne. Stop, I interrupted, holding up a hand. I don't want to hear any more excuses. You made your choices, Derek. And now I'm making mine. I filed for divorce the next day. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right thing to do. Derek begged me to reconsider, to let him make it up to me, but I couldn't. The trust between us was gone, and without trust, there was no foundation for a relationship. He agreed to the divorce eventually, though it was clear he didn't want to let me go. Sam reached out to me as well, thanking me for everything I had done for her and apologizing for what she had done. I didn't respond. I couldn't. She had been my friend, someone I had opened my home to during one of the darkest times of her life, and she had repaid my kindness with betrayal. By the time the divorce was finalized, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. The chapter of my life that had been defined by Derek and Sam was closed, and I was free to start anew. It wasn't an easy road, grief and betrayal don't disappear overnight, but it was a road I was determined to walk. The days after the divorce felt like walking through a thick fog. Everything around me seemed distant, muted. But amid the haze of heartbreak and anger, there was a faint glimmer of hope, a quiet voice reminding me that this was my chance to rebuild my life. I leaned heavily on my mother during those early weeks. She stayed with me, filling the silence of the house with her gentle encouragement and constant presence. She'd been furious when I first told her about Derek and Sam, her righteous anger a mirror of everything I was too exhausted to express. But as the weeks passed, her focus shifted to helping me heal. One night, as we sat in the living room sipping tea, she said something that stuck with me. Alyssa, you've always been the one holding everyone else together. It's time to let yourself fall apart and rebuild the life you deserve. Her words resonated deeply. For so long, I'd been the caretaker, the one who stepped up, who smoothed over conflicts, who put others' needs before my own. But now, I had to learn how to take care of myself. Returning to work was a welcome distraction. My colleagues were understanding and kind, giving me space to grieve while also helping me re-immerse myself in the rhythms of daily life. It felt strange to have moments of normalcy again, moments where I wasn't consumed by grief or betrayal. At home, I began sorting through Becca's belongings. It was a painful process, but also a cathartic one. Her diary, in particular, became a source of comfort. Reading her thoughts and memories reminded me of the vibrant, loving person she was. It was a bittersweet gift, a way to feel close to her even though she was gone. One entry, written months before her passing, caught my attention. Becca had noticed the growing closeness between Derek and Sam. She didn't spell it out, but her words hinted at unease. "It's weird," she had written. "They've been hanging out more, but they don't include Mom. I hope everything's okay." That sentence broke me. Becca had sensed something I'd been too blind, or too trusting, to see. It wasn't her burden to carry, yet she had worried about me even in her final days. With time, I made significant changes to my life. I moved out of the house Derek and I had shared, trading it for a cozy little home where I could start fresh. It wasn't as big or as polished, but it was mine. Every room felt like a blank canvas, a space I could fill with new memories. I also adopted a dog, a sweet Cavalier Spaniel named Charlie. He became my constant companion, his boundless energy and unconditional love bringing a lightness to my days that I hadn't felt in months. Derek, meanwhile, seemed to spiral further into his own misery. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had quit his job and turned to alcohol to cope. A part of me wanted to feel satisfaction at his downfall, but mostly, I just felt pity. He had made his choices, and now he was living with the consequences. As for Sam, I learned through a mutual friend that she had taken her own life. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been so angry with her, so hurt by her betrayal, but I never wished for her to suffer to this extent. Grief and guilt settled heavily on my shoulders. My therapist helped me process those complicated emotions. She reminded me that Sam's choices were her own, and I couldn't hold myself responsible for her actions. It was a long road to forgiveness, not for Sam or Derek, but for myself. Forgiving myself for being vulnerable, for trusting too much, for not seeing the cracks sooner. One of the most healing steps I took was planning a trip to Norway, a place Becca and I had always dreamed of visiting. It felt like a way to honor her memory, to carry a piece of her with me as I explored the world she had wanted to see. The trip was everything I had hoped it would be, breathtaking, peaceful, and deeply cathartic. Standing on a quiet fjord, surrounded by towering cliffs and the stillness of nature, I felt closer to Becca than I had in months. I whispered to her in the wind, sharing my thoughts and hopes, and for the first time since her passing, I felt a sense of peace. Now, months later, my life feels lighter. Not perfect, grief doesn't disappear, and healing isn't linear, but lighter. I've found a rhythm in my new normal, a balance between honoring Becca's memory and carving out a future for myself. I'm planning another trip, this time to Japan, another place Becca and I had dreamed of visiting. I'm also considering fostering animals, inspired by the joy Charlie has brought into my life. Through it all, I've learned to trust myself again. I've learned that it's okay to lean on others, to take time to heal, and to let go of the things that no longer serve me. Derek and Sam's betrayal no longer defines me. Becca's love and light do. I'm still a work in progress, but I'm finally hopeful for what's to come.